Chapter 5. One Nation Under a Hope, Race, Meritocracy, and Messiahs in the NBA. By Lisa Guerrero. A brief, and selective, vocabulary lesson. American, adjective, of or relating to the United States. N. A citizen of the United States. Dream, N. 1. A series of images, ideas, emotions, and sensations occurring during sleep. 2. A daydream, reverie. 3. A wild fancy or hope. 4. An ambition, aspiration. 5. One that is exceptionally gratifying, excellent, or beautiful. American dream, N. 1. A quaint and enduring, though largely imaginary, notion that America offers just reward for those willing to work for it. 2. A ruthless chimera used to maintain civil obedience and material productivity. 3. A cruel joke. First, a word from our sponsor. As LeBron James entered his fifth year in the NBA in 2008, the cult of LeBron James showed no signs of slowing down. In 5 short years, James had gone from a wish to a promise to a veritable dream fulfilled for NBA fans and marketers worldwide. But as Shakespeare wrote, "Uneasy lies the head that wears the crown," even in the NBA. For LeBron James, several events in the first half of 2008 would make the truth of this adage come alive. First, in April 2008, James achieved another first in an already impressive list of firsts and other superlative achievements in his young career. In theory, it was an interesting cultural milestone, as LeBron became the first black man to ever appear on the cover of Vogue. In reality, it was a signifying debacle. He appeared with a hulking, raging visage, grabbing onto the lithe, smiling, and white figure of supermodel Gisele Bündchen, a la King Kong clutching Pharaoh. The cover photo, as well as the entire spread that the image represented, was taken by famed photographer Annie Leibovitz, who, in subsequent interviews when asked about the photo, denied any ill intent or cultural/historical influence or reference. Meanwhile, fans, cultural pundits, sports writers, bloggers, and academics worked overtime debating the illusion, and effects of the historical cover. The most damning evidence for those who were arguing for the racist implications of the picture came in the form of a World War I propaganda poster entitled "Defeat This Mad Brute, Enlist," which depicted a large, black, frothing ape rampaging with a white woman collapsed in his arms. When critics placed the two images side by side, the comparisons were almost impossible to dismiss, from the position of LeBron's body and the expression on LeBron's face to the fashion and color of Gisele's dress. Even Gisele's pose, with her body slightly falling into James's grasp, is reminiscent of the early 20th century war poster. Considering the long history in the United States of black men being depicted as ape-like and animalistic, not to mention violent and a threat to white women in service to everything from selling household products to electing presidents to creating support for war strategies and unfair, dehumanizing laws, the criticism for the 21st century Vogue cover came as no surprise. And considering the equally long history in the United States of white Americans denying the significance of race to the fabric of the nation by any means necessary, the latest means being the rampant reliance on colorblind racism, the vehement counter-critiques came as no surprise either. Many of those who considered a racial reading of the image as hysterical blamed the reading, and those supporting such a reading, for being the real racists. In arguing against a racialized reading of the cover, most lay commentators, especially those within the blogosphere, decried the so-called obviousness of racism by saying that it was not until the comparison was made with the propaganda poster by those crying racism that the idea of James as a kind of King Kong even entered their minds. Even James himself, according to his publicist, saw nothing startling about the cover, and was actually pleased with the picture that he felt accurately captured his game-playing intensity. So, what then, did people think of the image if they didn't think it had any racist undertones, or overtones for that matter? The juxtaposition of the two bodies was clearly deliberate. There was an obvious desire to demonstrate stark contrast. If that had not been the goal, the cover would have featured LeBron James and Shaquille O'Neal, or alternatively, Gisele and Heidi Klum. Are we to read nothing into the conscious choice of a large black man in a faux aggressive near embrace with a willowy white woman? A fantastical pairing whose imagined audacity has continued to shape America's ideological fear and political bigotry for over 100 years, leaving countless black men lynched, incarcerated, or otherwise disenfranchised, we are now to assume means nothing at all? The spread of which the cover was a part was a layout devoted to the secrets of the best bodies and featured athletes paired with models. All the athletes were men. All the models were women. And while the athletes were of varied races, all of the models were white, which stood as a curious choice given the current glut of models of color, especially those of mixed race. However subtle, the choice of an all-white cast of female models succeeded in again reifying the elevated status of white womanhood in the arena of idealized notions of beauty, an ideology that further loaded the cover image with historical burden. And though not all of the athletes were white, James was the only black athlete. As the issue's cover model, James was meant to be marked as remarkable, even among all the exceptionalism the spread purported to highlight. What was the singularity of James that the photos hoped to capture? It is true that James is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, superstars in the NBA today. Of course, so is Kobe Bryant, but Vogue didn't choose him. Perhaps they knew that the shadow of another white woman from Colorado would ruin the frame, or Tim Duncan, or Dwayne Wade, or Kevin Garnett, or Yao Ming. No, the cover sought to capitalize on the particular reading that has been placed onto the image of LeBron James since the moment he entered the popular consciousness, that of an unstoppable, unprecedented force. Of a second coming. Of Jordan, not Jesus. Of course, his career is still young. United we rise. Then, later in the year, as the summer of 2008 drew to a close, LeBron James saw himself lead the Redeem Team into the Beijing Olympics with the singular goal of returning glory to the flagging mantle of USA men's basketball. With a team featuring the likes of Kobe Bryant, Dwayne Wade, Dwight Howard, Carmelo Anthony, and James himself, and coached by the patron saint of Duke basketball, Mike Krzyzewski, the Redeem Team sought not only to restore the dominance of USA men's basketball in international competition but also to reshape the image of American basketball players from prima donnas and thugs to patriots and gentlemen. Their official slogan, United We Rise, reflected this new attitude. But in May 2008, the road to redemption got just a little rockier when Kobe Bryant and James, separately, became vocal about the crisis in Darfur and China's role in it. First, Bryant recorded a PSA about the crisis for the non-profit movement Aid Still Required. Following the ad, Bryant stated he would speak out about the crisis in Beijing. James, too, after suffering a great deal of flack for not signing a letter earlier in the year written by his then-teammate, Ira Nubel, denouncing China's role in the genocide taking place in Darfur, promised to speak out at the Olympics and hoped that the NBA Olympians would band together with a plan on how to address the situation. He articulated his impassioned commitment this way: at the end of the day we're talking about human rights. And people should understand that human rights and people's lives are in jeopardy. We're not talking about contracts here. We're not talking about the money. We're talking about people's lives being lost, and that means a lot more to me than some money or a contract. In the end, however, after arriving to Beijing, both Bryant and James appeared to back down, way down, from their previous statements. First, Bryant stated, "Nothing's changed. It's just time to play basketball. I'm not a government official or politician. I'll let them do that." After being reminded that he hadn't been a politician when he first spoke out, he responded, "That's different than coming out here and speaking about it on a daily basis. If the politicians want to get paid to shoot jump shots, then they can come and do that." James maintained this apolitical line when he said, "Basic human rights should always be protected. One thing you can't do is confuse sports and politics. I think the political guys are going to do what they need to do, that's their job. We are here to concentrate on a gold medal. Sports and politics just don't match." In a few short months, Bryant and James quickly shed their activist personas and returned to those personas that people, including both fans and corporate America, were more comfortable with: black basketball players who played basketball, and who didn't try to break out of their Procrustean bed by actually paying attention to the world, standing up for something, and speaking so well in the name of something other than the team, basketball shoes, or sports drinks. Sports and politics just don't match. Indeed. At least they don't if a black athlete in America doesn't want his invitation to the American dream revoked. Because even though at the end of the day we're talking about human rights, for black athletes in the NBA we're also talking about the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in a country that has historically looked on their inclusion as provisional. Both the Kong James photo, as some have come to refer to it, and the Beijing backdown, as I have come to refer to it, vividly mark the dilemma that sits at the center of this essay. Why are today's black NBA players forced to negotiate the fickle ideological pressure that demands that they sell an illusion of a constructed black realness as long as they don't buy into it themselves? Even as the rest of America, and the world, does? They also demonstrate just how far, and how quickly, one young man from Akron, Ohio, has ascended to the heart of the tempest that is race and sports in America in the 21st century, a tempest that has made the path toward American racial redemption uncertain. Increasingly, that road to redemption has come to more closely resemble the road to perdition. On and off the court. At this point, can there be any turning back? For any of us? The color of the American dream, or Oprah knows best. Flashback, 3 years earlier. During an interview in September 2005, Oprah Winfrey posed a series of questions to her guest, NBA superstar LeBron James, that, far from creating the friendly, down-home atmosphere usually afforded celebrity guest stars on her show, constructed him as a scolded child to her much wiser authority. James, the 20-year-old phenom, youngest NBA Rookie of the Year, ever, and the $100 million man, was a vision of preppy chic, sporting a baby blue V-neck sweater over a tailored and pressed white cotton dress shirt, paired with navy blue trousers and a pair of Nikes from his eponymous line and multi-carat diamond studs in either ear. However, his generally conservative visage was unable to provide any safe haven from the distortive and stereotypical assumptions of his playa ways that lay at the heart of nearly all of Winfrey's questions, including, "Do you think it's all too much too soon? And do you, or do you think you will ever regret not going to college?" Winfrey's questions, and her subsequent and only mildly hidden dissatisfaction with his answers are representative of a larger ideological problem in the American mainstream regarding NBA players and their perceived dubious relationship to the American dream. James cordially entertained Oprah's questions, trying earnestly, though mainly unsuccessfully, to convince her, and assumedly the mass American population that makes connections to her, that he was an individual, not a type, and that he recognized the feat and phenomenon of his fame but that the largesse of his accomplishments did not automatically preclude the possibility of being a responsible, productive, and conscientious member of society. When he readily answered no to Oprah's question about college and whether or not he would regret not going, she all but mocked his response by turning immediately to his mother in the audience and asking the same question, ostensibly looking for the right answer. When his mother supported LeBron's ability to measure for himself his own limits and potential, and more specifically, his decision to not attend college, Winfrey quickly returned her attention to LeBron without comment, and moved to her next question, succeeding in this one moment of explicit disinterest and dismissiveness in reifying the popular notions of being unfit that surround two greatly vilified groups, black athletes and single mothers, in the American imagination. It also exposed just how completely the latent assumptions regarding the mind/body split of black men in America, especially black athletes, had infiltrated the consciousness of the national public. It is accepted that LeBron possesses a physical, athletic mastery that makes him a successful basketball player, while it is virtually mocked that he could possess the intelligence to make him a smart and responsible man. It occurred to me as I sat horrified watching the exchange between LeBron and Oprah that if Oprah had been interviewing Paris Hilton, the 20-something era/icon whose multi-millions she has not earned wholly on her own, who has made a professional career out of simply being seen, and public displays of affection with her attractive celebrity boyfriend du jour, including a highly popular and profitable sex tape, and who, to anyone's knowledge, has never attended college, Oprah would never think to ask her the same questions as she was posing, or rather, aiming, at James, even though they would seemingly be equally fitting. And though I recognize that the analogy is not exactly one-to-one, my point is obvious. Why does Oprah, and America generally, assume that NBA players as a whole, especially the newest generation, and, it is assumed, unlike other normal people, are irresponsible citizens who need to be reminded, seemingly at every turn, both of the sacredness of the meritocratic American dream and of the apparent ways in which they are flouting the rules of achievement and sullying the meaning of success in America? Having done nothing except hone his exceptional athletic ability and translate that to a successful professional career, both on the court and in the global market, LeBron James has instantaneously been inducted into the pantheon of American transgression due to his race, his gender, and his version of the American dream while simultaneously emerging as the NBA's next messiah, due again, ironically, to his race, his gender, and his version of the American dream. He promises to be the next Jordan in both talent and marketability, delivering the league unto a marketing promised land that has not been visited since Michael Jordan's second retirement from the Chicago Bulls at the end of the 1997-1998 season. Sports Illustrated dubbed him the Chosen One while he was still in high school, a messianic designation that proved telling when, in 2003, he was taken first in the first round of the NBA draft by the Cleveland Cavaliers, quickly ascending to the throne, honorifically anointed in his number 23 jersey, to become known as King James. But after only 3 years in the league, 3 years in which the image of the NBA quickly turned to that of a gangsta's paradise, That title has proved to be paradoxical and as much a burden as it ever was a blessing. This chapter examines the ways in which the newer generations of African American NBA players have been constructed in the popular imagination as transgressors of the American dream, as well as the problematics of the messianic impulse in the league, with the fans, and with corporate America. Focusing on the singular rise of LeBron James, including the manner in which he is being interpolated in various arenas of the American public sphere, I am interested in examining the manner in which various rhetorical frames of the American dream get used to construct these black male bodies as somehow outside of its reaches because of the materiality, hypervisibility, and performativity of their version of American success. It is this relationship between vilification and veneration that I interrogate, tracing how it creates a paradoxical identity formation that is forced to negotiate ideologies of American exceptionalism, racial containment, and global market economies. These bootstraps were made for walking, selling BLACK the American dream. America's belief in meritocracy and the sacred notion of bootstraps ideology are uniquely served by the arena of sports at all levels, and the largely naive, often delusional, assumptions around the purity of competition that accompany the fanatical popularity of sporting events in our country. Athletic competition in the United States is perceived, mainly inaccurately, as one of the few places where the best man truly does win regardless of race, class, and, thanks to Title IX, gender. Rarely is it taken into consideration the effects that institutional racism, sexism, and classism have on individuals' abilities to even participate in the athletic arena to begin with. Additionally, as with many public institutions and events, America has a selective and short cultural memory regarding the place of sporting heroes once they reach their heroic stature. Though it was unquestionably trendy to want to be like Mike in the 1990s, that kind of hero worship of a black athlete by both fans and Wall Street was really a late 20th century phenomenon. No one had ever sold product and American dream ideology by saying that they wanted to be like Jackie, or Satchel Paige, or Wilma Rudolph, or Jack Johnson, or John Carlos and Tommy Smith. It wasn't until the original number 23 stepped on the professional hardwood and put a stranglehold on the American popular imagination that a black athlete could be conceived, in both ideological and market terms, as a living embodiment of the American dream fantasy. Of course M.J. was not the first black athlete to be popular with American audiences. The list of black athletes who, as both predecessors and peers, garnered fame and fortune for largely unparalleled athletic prowess in football, baseball, track and field, boxing, and, of course, basketball, is endless. But outside of their respective playing fields, none of those athletes stood in proximity to our collective notions of what it meant to symbolize the American dream. For most of them, including O.J. Simpson, pre-White Bronco, Magic Johnson, Carl Lewis, and Sugar Ray Leonard, the politics of respectability allowed them to sell us candy bars, cars, cereal, and beer, but not values and lifestyles. It allowed them to move on up to the suburbs, just as long as they didn't move in next door, and it also allowed them to become celebrities while still stopping short of becoming symbols of the sacred American catechism of work ethic and self-reliance. They were good athletes. They were respectable African Americans. But they were certainly not role models for the American dream. For others, including Jack Johnson, Muhammad Ali, John Carlos, and Tommy Smith, though their athleticism could not be denied, their transgressions could not be forgiven. These black athletes became legend for challenging American smugness, ignorance, hatred, and hubris and paid with their ideological exile from the nation's fantasy of the American dream. But in 1984, Michael Jordan took his place on the Chicago Bulls and ushered in a new era of black athlete who laid purposeful claim to the rhetoric and ideology of the American dream, and to whom, for a very brief moment, emphasis on very brief, the American public was all too happy to hand over the mantle of keepers of the dream. Jordan would become an unexpected but powerful touchstone in the market of American values and exceptionalism, which is, as C.L. Cole states, evidenced by his excessive commodification. Cole continues, noting, his, Jordan's, innumerable commodified forms are fueled by popular sentiments of excellence, authenticity, sincerity, generosity, and responsibility, and a rhetoric that intertwines community, nation, tradition, development, and good times. He wasn't just living the American dream. For the American public he was the American dream, and they were willing to spend millions of dollars on sports drinks, batteries, hot dogs, and basketball shoes to keep the dream alive. Before Jordan's arrival in 1984, the NBA was mildly popular, though it paled in comparison to the popular clamor for the more all-American sports of baseball and football, and was nowhere near the manic, market powerhouse it was to become in the 1990s with Jordan's help. What was the difference? Certainly there had been talented NBA players prior to the arrival of Michael Jordan, and many of them, if not most, were African American. Bill Russell, Dr. J, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Wilt Chamberlain were all masters of the basketball craft. They were respected for their talent and found a modest claim to celebrity, but they were not discussed in the messianic terms that Jordan would command in the American public sphere and bequeath to the generation of players that would follow him. As Mary G. McDonald explains in her essay Safe Sex Symbol, Michael Jordan and the Politics of Representation, this lapse in popularity before 1984, Jordan's initiation year in the NBA when he won Rookie of the Year, made his first visit to the playoffs, and signed a deal with Nike, was due, in part, to a largely white audience's inability to connect to a largely black league. Indeed, during the 1970s and early 1980s attendance and commercial support had waned in the NBA because the largely white audience with targeted financial clout grew less interested as African American athletes took over the league's numerical majority. In part, this stalled popularity was also due to the difference in historical periods. The social climate during the 1960s through the early 1980s, marked mainly by the prevalent tug-of-war over civil rights, social programs, and race politics, greatly dictated the limits placed on American consumers' imaginations as to what, and from whom, they were interested in buying their American lifestyles. Up until that point, NBA players were simply athletes, not yet style mavens, cultural pundits, or ideological icons. They were considered meritorious within the realm of professional sports, though still less so than those athletes in football and baseball. A skyhook was nice, but it wasn't replacing the traditional notions of success in America like becoming a doctor or a lawyer or the president. Those were professions and positions by which true American meritocracy could, and would, be measured. But beginning in the latter part of the 80s and into the 90s, the nation would be dominated both socially and politically by the growing acknowledgement of the place of the United States in a rapidly shifting global community, including the explosive significance of global corporatization. As Norman K. Denzin has said, the global awareness of the NBA intersected directly with the globalization of corporate America in the 90s. It would be in this radically different American, and worldwide, climate that Michael Jordan would single-handedly change the look of meritocracy and the definition of the American dream for a more than obliging American public who was beginning to be convinced of the socially constructed link between commodity and American success. Breaking the mold, selling Jordan. The lore of Jordan's rise and domination is, by now, well known by most people worldwide, and is, in fact, a virtual how-to for up-and-coming American athletes, especially African American athletes, who are hoping to translate athletic talent into a command of the media and market machines of professional sports. He arrived in the NBA having already gained some renown for hitting the game-winning shot for North Carolina as a freshman to win the 1982 NCAA title. After his dominance of the NBA, the global market, and people's imaginations were established, the image of that NCAA championship shot, as well as various other sundry images and stories, like M.J. being cut from his varsity basketball team when he was a sophomore, became crucial components in creating Jordan mythology and linking it to American ideology. This terrain of Michael Jordan as athlete, as black man, and as global market talisman has been well covered by scholars and economists, sports analysts and media honchos, and cultural pundits and public relations conglomerates, and my discussion of him here is not an attempt to uncover something new about the M.J. era. Rather, I want to identify two of the most compelling points made by some of these thinkers regarding Jordan the man and Jordan the brand to use in aggregate as a critical means of examining the place of the American dream in today's NBA as well as the significance of the second coming in the figure of LeBron James. The first is one of the central aspects of M.J.'s success that recurs endlessly in scholarly analyses of him as a cultural phenomenon and that also has significant relevance in thinking about the marked transformation in audience response to today's NBA superstars. It is the role played by ideologies of racial transcendence in the creation of Michael Jordan as both a perfect pitchman and an American dream icon. The perceived ability to transcend one's race is both rare and problematic, but in the case of Michael Jordan, it is also worth billions of dollars worldwide. Most black athletes, especially NBA players, are connected intrinsically to popular understandings and attitudes regarding race. Regardless of how a player is translated in the public sphere, either as a nice guy, like former San Antonio Spur David Robinson, or a prima donna, like Los Angeles Laker Kobe Bryant, or a thug, like Boston Celtic Rasheed Wallace, or Los Angeles Lakers infamous Ron Artest, Those characterizations always stand in relation to their blackness as either a consequence of it or an exception to it. Michael Jordan, on the other hand, was able to attain an image beyond blackness through a constant marketing regimen that relocated Jordan's imagined character and self/sign within his extraordinary skill and undeniable charisma. As C.L. Cole explains it, the rhetoric of transcendence is tied to notions of exceptionalism that appear to distance Jordan from the semiotic field that locates and positions other African American men/players. Cole goes further by saying, "Indeed, it was during the 1980s, in the midst of America's panic around urban crime, drugs, violence, and heightened racism that Michael Jordan came of age as American Jordan. I use the term American Jordan to refer to Jordan's position as a representative character of America's political culture and as an effective figure in the national symbolic. As a figure in the national symbolic, American Jordan reproduces national fantasy, by which I mean the nation's imagined origins, organization, and character. American Jordan is both a product of and exists at the intersection of political life and effect, the site at which national fantasy is generated and affirmed." Cole's reading of Jordan as American Jordan captures the essence of the notion of racial transcendence through the removal of a racial signification and the adoption of a universalizing national character. Not only does Jordan cease to be black through this transcendent lens, but also he is also elevated to the stature of uber-American. The brilliant simplicity of Gatorade's Be Like Mike campaign is, perhaps, the best example of the effectiveness of the racially transcendent quality of Jordan and his image. Immediately, the intimate identification of Jordan as Mike creates an everyman quality to the marketing. Mike's your friend, he's your buddy, he's just like you. Only better because he defies common athletic expectations, both of physicality and of character, he even defies gravity, he's rich and successful, and he's a role model. At the same time that he is presented as the common man, a characteristic typically limited to whiteness, in his simple perseverance for achievement and success he is also shown to be in superlative example. It's not just that everyone, regardless of race, age, or gender, can dream about being that exceptional, it is that they should dream about being that exceptional. The lyrics to the commercial jingle begin, "Sometimes I dream that he is me. You've got to see that's how I dream to be." Interestingly, these jingle lyrics expressly elicit notions of striving that are connected to similar notions contrived around the ideology of the American dream. They imagine Michael Jordan as a touchstone of aspiration, success, and individualism, in other words, a touchstone of America itself. This American equation is neatly completed with the fact that it is being used to advance market capitalism with the promotion of something as banal as a sports drink. All this considered, of critical significance is the fact that nowhere within the message is it suggested, implicitly or explicitly, that race, either as an affirmation or a deterrent, has anything to do with Jordan's position. Within the narrative thrust of the campaign, Jordan is rendered raceless, though problematically that racelessness cannot escape being scripted onto a black male body. Ultimately, this problematic aspect of Jordan's racelessness means that his transcendence and momentary disruption of the black male as transgressor equation relies almost completely on the ideological negation of blackness, especially black manhood. This leads to the second important aspect of critical analyses around Jordan in which I am interested, the use of notions of threat and containment of the black male body that Jordan's racial transcendence served to maintain. As David Andrews has observed about Jordan, he is an agent of racial displacement. Jordan's valorized, racially neutered image displaces racial codes onto other black bodies, whom the popular media seems intent on criminalizing. This signification of Jordan perpetuated the him/them dichotomy that pitted respectability, read, white, that he was seen as embodying against threat, read, black, that the popular imagination understood, and still understands, to be embodied in the monolith of black masculinity, including urban black youth and flamboyant/cocky/imposing/enigmatic/angry black basketball celebrities, reifying America's belief that the preservation of American dream values depended on the containment of that threat through the elevation of a transcendent respectability. Or as Michael Hochman has remarked, Jordan does not just transcend race in the United States, rather, he transforms race for white viewers, providing a desired alignment for white folks with a black personality who does not appear to pose a threat. So that, not only did Jordan turn into a sign of himself, Andrews, through what Andrews terms aggressive branding, but he also became a perceived social and cultural justification for the continued indictment of all other types of blackness who could not, or would not, break through their racialization to shake off the mark of transgression. These other types of blackness included the villainized black urban masses who, during Jordan's era of the 80s and the early 90s, were disproportionately falling victim to the Reagan-Bush blitzkrieg on education, social programs, and civil rights policies, as well as African American celebrities in music, movies, and sports, including Eddie Murphy and NWA, who were committed to accentuating blackness in the ways they were marketed and sold. Jordan's racial transcendence, like that of his television counterpart, Cliff Huxtable on The Cosby Show, may not have provided any actual safeguard against real-world social transgressions linked to racial identities and politics, but it certainly contributed to keeping safe the colorblind racist assumptions and ideologies that created and upheld the institutionalized containment, and outright repression in many cases, of the black body, especially the black male body, in America. As Andrews points out, the subsequent globalization of Jordan's celebrityhood has contributed to the emergence of a televisually based transnational racial order, prefigured on the production and circulation of universalizing, non-threatening, and thereby highly marketable, representations of black ethnic otherness. It seemed to be assumed that if black Americans really could, or would, just be like Mike, then we would be able to all just get along. But wishing couldn't make it so, though it could sell a lot of Gatorade. Ultimately, Jordan and his unrivaled power of signification and selling could not keep the American racial nation safe from itself indefinitely. The world had changed dramatically during his 15-year sports career, and with it changed the model of American racial representation. His final departure from the Chicago Bulls at the end of the 1998 season seemed to signal a seemingly irreparable rupture between the league and the fans, with the arrival of a bastion of younger players whose style and barely contained sense of entitlement ushered in a shift in spirit that put America's popular imagination on notice that the American dream was alive and well. And ironic as hell. How you like me now? Marketing the NBA into the 21st century. Thus 1999 was a watershed moment in the growing paradoxical nature of 21st-century professional sports, with the market void left by Jordan being filled with prime-time players ready for their close-ups and knowledgeable in the ways of self-promotion, celebrity, and the performance-hungry, and often fickle, fans. Today, professional athletes, none more so than NBA heroes, enjoy a public deification that reveals just how well millions of aspirants within the American public have constructed for themselves and their ideological well-being the classic rags to riches story of American hard work and opportunity through the images and careers of sports superstars, while at the same time relying on the racial demarcations of sports celebrities, especially those of the African American-dominated NBA, to maintain social and ideological order through stereotypical assumptions and moral designations. One of the largest reasons for the increasing paradox and irony within the NBA has to do with the league's strategy, beginning in the 1990s, to grow the NBA's popularity by purposefully linking it to hip-hop culture in hopes of bringing the same fans of rap and hip-hop, especially white suburban youth with disposable incomes, to basketball, as well as give the NBA the same kind of urban, hip authenticity that was making the alterity of hip-hop an unprecedented global marketing power. This stood in vivid contradistinction to the league's earlier strategy during the 1980s to promote a kinder, gentler NBA with the constructed celebrity of model black athletes whose, in C.L. Cole's terms, racially neutered identity created a racial comfort zone for a primarily white audience. As Mary McDonald notes, during the 1980s the NBA initiated new promotional campaigns attempting to court white and middle-class audiences. According to C.L. Cole and Harry Denny, the NBA constructed and marketed a culturally acceptable public face of black masculinity by highlighting glamorous athletic personalities such as Earvin Magic Johnson. New promotional narratives marked and marketed the players with classic American ideologies of patriotism, rugged individualism, and racial equality. The entertaining character of the NBA functioned to suppress racist suggestions of threat or deviance. But during the 1990s, with the dominant rise of rap and hip-hop, American audiences, especially white audiences, were looking for spaces of racial voyeurism, a means of experiencing the other without having to acknowledge one's social relationship to the other. This new market trend made the NBA's hip-hop marketing strategy, in a word, work. It catapulted the NBA into the global commodity stratosphere. Its success provided the place for urban, hip-hop culture to infiltrate all aspects of the league, from the adoption of the extra baggy shorts donned by the players to the hiring of hip-hop stars to create NBA and playoff theme songs to the ultimate marriage of basketball and hip-hop. Hip-hop stars like Usher and Jay-Z becoming part owners of NBA teams by the dawn of the millennium. But as the century wound down, so too did the league's and the fans' tolerance and desire for the hip-hop-informed performance and attitude that had been engendered by their own commercial creation. African American players began to be looked upon as pimps and thugs who were sullying the pristine nature of fundamental athletic competition. They were vilified for allowing street wisdom and emotion to bleed into the arena of professional sports, an arena constructed as hallowed and decorous and deserving of a certain kind of proper respect. One need look no further than the explosive clamor over the 2004 fight that broke out between Ron Artest and Ben Wallace during an Indiana/Detroit matchup to expose the popular fear harbored by fans and NBA leaders of unleashing just such a street rage within the supposed safe haven of a professional sports arena, in this case, the Palace at Auburn Hills. In its aftermath, the fight was referred to by many names, including Malice at the Palace, Palace Brawl, Motown Melee, Throwdown at Motown, and Basket Brawl, all of which capture the sense of social panic and the character of uncontrolled aggression with which the NBA has become dubiously identified in the minds of the American public and its pundits as its connection to hip-hop and the urban has grown stronger. It is an identification located in popular culture that, on the one hand, is merely a reflective manifestation of the long-held notions of transgression that have been associated with blackness in American society, while on the other it exposes the problematic tension in the United States between mediating blackness and marketing it. During the November 19, 2004, game, then, Indiana Pacer Ron Artest became the center of attention during a clash that erupted between him and several of his teammates, their opponents, the Detroit Pistons, and Detroit fans, resulting in the longest non-drug or non-betting-related suspension in NBA history for Artest as well as threatening proof of the perceived devolution of the propriety of athletic competition. But even before this media-scrutinized event, NBA players had started to be characterized as interlopers into the theater of the American dream because the bootstraps they pulled up were high tops and because they navigated the American road to success in do-rags and tattoos to the soundtrack of Tupac. The effect, as noted by David Leonard in The Real Color of Money, Controlling Black Bodies in the NBA, is that the simultaneous commodification and demonization of hip-hop and its black male signifiers within the NBA has made visible the complex and contradictory place of aesthetics, cultural values, and bodies that are constructed both fashionable, desirable and cool, and suspect, dangerous. Interestingly, the white players in the NBA, as a group, remained outside of this culture of vilification, despite the general adoption by many of them, including Jason Williams, Chris Anderson, Bob Sura, and Mike Miller, of the hip-hop character through attire, tattoos, and attitude, an instance that Eric Watts and Mark Orb would call spectacular consumption, wherein the spectacle is fully realized when the enhanced appearance of the image becomes more significant than the social world it previously represented. The absence of white players, even those who performed the same hip-hop personas, from the blanket of criticism made it clear that it was the presumed blackness of the NBA that was under fire, as well as the urban trends within a league that recalled its intrinsic connection to this blackness of character. The ironic conflation of the NBA and hip-hop culture in the eyes of much of the American audience serves as a less than obvious reiteration of the centuries-old social illogic of the black male body as the locus of transgression as well as an expedient sidestepping of blatantly racist invocations. It is a moment that exemplifies Norman Denzin's argument that the black other occupies a complex site, a place where fears, desires, and repressed dreams are lodged. The black body is a site of spectacle, its blackness, as Herman Gray argues, a potential measure of evil and menace. Subsequently, the league conveniently forgot that, not only had they masterminded the market affiliation between hip-hop and the NBA but they had also profited handsomely from that connection in the popular imagination, when in 2005 they instituted a ban on hip-hop attire as a provision inside their collective bargaining agreement with the Players Union, thus ushering in yet another age in the marketing of the NBA that returned racial signification to a more palatable place for American audiences. Or as Denzin has said, race would be back in its proper place, repressed and so visible that it becomes invisible, and the league seems to have placed this new era squarely on the shoulders of LeBron James, whose marketability strikes a lucrative balance between an urban authenticity and a neoliberal respectability. All hail King James. LeBron James doesn't just represent the marketing futures of the NBA, as well as Nike and Coca-Cola, but he also represents the redemption of the Cleveland Cavaliers franchise and the city of Cleveland itself, as only a modern-day, basket-making Moses can. Type his name into a Google search and you get 52,200 hits, says Ryan White, sports writer for The Oregonian. Check him out on eBay, where there are 1,040 items including a brand new James High School throwback jersey. A brand new throwback. You are bidding on a LeBron, James basketball. Another auctioneer declares. People who can't even spell his name are profiting. The rest are profiting. Money or hyperbole. He's been engulfed in both. The weight of this role as Messiah is being carried by an African-American man who, at 18 years old, his age when he entered the NBA, could not legally drink and who simultaneously became eligible to vote and to be drafted by the military as he was being drafted into the NBA. But these things, like Jordan's being cut from his varsity team, serve as ideal raw material on which to build the James lore, which after only a brief 9-year period, spanning his high school career and the infancy of his NBA career, has already been writ large. It is the beginning of a legend that relies not only on James's future achievements but also on America's ability to see both themselves and their ideologies of success and hard work as represented in those achievements. It is a precarious performance that is required of James. As novelist Paul Beatty has written in regard to the paradoxical space of black men in America, this Messiah gig is a bitch. James's ineluctable connection to the American dream is as transparent at the beginning of his career as it would eventually become for Michael Jordan at the height and end of his career. Before he even stepped onto the professional hardwood, LeBron's phenomenon was being explained by journalists like this: the reason for all the fuss lies not just in his on-court athleticism and a talent for passing a ball that has drawn comparisons with Magic Johnson, but in the way he embodies the American dream. Though, even as the populace seems ready and willing to bestow the mantle of keeper of the dream onto young LeBron, they do not do so without trepidation, a trepidation born out of a socialized distrust of the rest of the young, black generation of NBA players for whom they already harbor an ideological fear. As NuBlaXity put it, he will not only have to play like a man, but act like a man. It will require judgment, perspective, prudence, and moderation. This statement, though supposedly referring to James's youth, also demonstrates the contentious relationship that has always existed between blackness and manhood in the nation's eye. In the United States, manhood is not a foregone conclusion if you are black. It requires a very regimented and particular performance, outlined to some degree by NuBlaXity. NuBlaXity's comments also expose the racialized paradox of the American dream. Whereas the American public readily translates varied displays of excess from white celebrities as normalized terms of the American dream, and further proof of their representation of the dream, the translation of that same excess as performed by black celebrities, especially black male celebrities, is one of disrespect and abuse, eliciting calls for moderation and serving as further proof of their denigration of the dream. Following this sensibility, the American populace is also not conferring the vestiges of the American dream on James without implicit, oftentimes explicit, expectations that his rise and preservation of an American rubric of hard work, respectability, and success will thwart the perceived racial and ideological transgression of the rest of the young, black generation of NBA players. In this way, his place, as an agent of containment, is very similar to Michael Jordan, but in other key ways, his place clearly is not. The icon versus the phenom. The differences between the MJ phenomenon and the LeBron machine not only concretize the American public's love/hate relationship with the NBA and its superstars, but it also foregrounds the mutability of the image of the American dream, especially as it appears in service to popular and racial imaginaries as well as global market commodities. The first of two main differences between the meritocratic messiahs is that the creation of the Jordan icon evolved step by step while the LeBron package seems to have come onto the scene almost fully formed. As a junior in high school he was already a Sports Illustrated cover story. As a senior in high school his games were on ESPN2, his home games were on pay-per-view, and he drove a Hummer, the fact of which also gave him his first publicized controversy. As a high school senior, he had a publicist before he was even drafted, and, having yet to pick up a basketball as an NBA professional, he had three major sporting goods corporations, Adidas, Reebok, and Nike, vying for the potential to capitalize on his outrageous star power, the outrageous star power of a high school senior. Once he was taken in the first round of the 2003 draft he had a $90 million contract from Nike, plus a $10 million signing bonus, and a 4-year, $16.8 million contract with the Cleveland Cavaliers, making him worth almost $120 million before even playing in the NBA. He is a free-floating dollar sign, as David Leonard said to me in conversation about the LeBron frenzy. It will only get better with time for him, said Skylar Beman, assistant managing editor of the Sports Business Daily. LeBron is as close to a can't-miss property as you can find. Or as basketball writer Dan Wetzel stated on Sportsline.com, LeBron James is a walking lottery ticket waiting to be cashed. Just for those keeping score at home, in 1997, after almost 13 years in the league, Jordan's total income was estimated to be in excess of $70 million. That's $50 million less for a 13-year proven track record. However, what is more significant than the money, though, let's be honest, the money is pretty significant, is the direction the American dream has taken in the fable of each man. America's notion of Jordan was one that traced the American dream through his accomplishments, his character, and his success. It allowed his exceptionalism to transcend race and make him a universal signifier of American success. Alternatively, the nation's notion of LeBron is one that has already reached its destination through the hype, anticipation, and expectation. It requires that his exceptionalism be representative of both a nation and a race, and could wind up making him a signifier of American excess. Anything less than the next Michael Jordan will be considered a disappointment. Even James himself is intent on becoming, in his words, a global brand. The implication is that it is an inevitability, not a possibility, as it had been with Jordan. "I think even Michael Jordan got a chance to become Michael Jordan," said Danny Ainge. "This guy hasn't had that opportunity. But with those $90 million shoe contracts, I think there is a lot of intrigue and excitement. This intrigue and excitement is because it has already been decided that LeBron is a hero and that facticity of his hero-ness is what's being sold, materially and ideologically." As Paul Swangard, professor and managing director of the Warsaw Sports Marketing Center at the University of Oregon, explains, "It's all about lifestyle marketing now. I'm not sure these kids who follow LeBron are all going to go out and buy Hummers tomorrow, or all go out to buy his expensive shoes at the Foot Locker. But it is certainly something they aspire to, and these kids tend to look up to those type of heroes. Thus America's desire for, not only heroes, but those type of heroes that construct a translated, consumable blackness to assuage contemporary racial anxieties, already makes LeBron James, in varied and problematic ways, a fait accompli, a dream, not deferred, but already dreamed." And whereas Jordan was imagined outside of blackness in his messianic pose, James is significantly positioned firmly within a assigned field of blackness. Just as the fact of James's hero-ness is being constructed and employed in certain ways within the public sphere and global market, so too is the fact of his blackness, which operates in what Michael Eric Dyson calls the contradictory impulses of the contemporary culture of consumption, where the black athletic body is deified, reified, and re-articulated within the narrow meanings of capital and commodity. Unlike Jordan, who didn't really market blackness, except in the implicit and highly contentious connections made between basketball and blackness, and who was marketed beyond blackness, always selling the raceless fantasy of meritocracy and excellence, LeBron is marketed differently. He is marketed through blackness, albeit a blackness that is largely performative. With LeBron, blackness isn't erased. In fact, part of his marketing power relies on his ability to play to America's, especially white America's, expectations of their familiarity with blackness. His highly popular series of Nike commercials with the LeBrons is a good example of the way in which blackness is used as a signifier in the marketing of James as respectable, authentic, and racially other, though not racially threatening. In the series, James plays all four characters in the fictitious LeBron family, including Pops, the older LeBron brother who is suave in a retro, Billy D. Williams kind of way, LeBron himself who is always dressed in his NBA uniform, and little LeBron Jr. who is constantly outside of the family exchanges because he always has his headphones on. All of the commercials in the series center around the family talking about some aspect of basketball, be it Pops' glory days or LeBron's new sneaker, and recall popularized versions of the black family as entertaining, from Good Times to Family Matters and from The Cosby Show to Everybody Hates Chris. Each episode of the Nike series shows the LeBrons in a characteristically black behavior, from signifying stories, or bald-headed lies as they're called, at the dinner table to macking in the mirror to dancing to Rick James's Super Freak, including the requisite performance of the robot by the older LeBron brother. Like most of Nike's campaigns, the LeBron series focuses little time on the product of shoes and centers more clearly on the product of LeBron himself. The series shows that not only is LeBron a hardwood maestro but also he's funny, entertaining, and can dance well, the unstated implication being just like all black people. He remains safe because he exists in an immovable racialized space created by the public and the market culture that manages racial panics by locating blackness in confined performative geographies like athletics and entertainment. In other words, in a world of blackness that is understandable because it is the one that exists in the national imagination. David Andrews has argued that American culture simply does not tolerate individuals who are, to put it plainly, too black. But it is also true that the American public needs individuals who are really black in order to give meaning to white identity as well as to provide evidence of a colorblind post-civil rights America. It is just that those who are really black in the minds of white America are linked less to the reality of blackness than they are to the reality of whiteness, By which I mean to say that whiteness only exists as something real in the face of blackness, and that particular blackness need not be real itself, and in fact, rarely is, at least in a substantive way. Blackness must simply be constructed in a certain way to legitimate ideologies that maintain American racial logics, allowing for moral designations to be made and understood on the basis of race alone. Consequently, LeBron is a dancing, performing caricature of blackness, as he is in the Nike commercials featuring the LeBrons, is acceptable, though clearly not real, even as it is very clearly marked as black, and in many ways, necessary to his market power because it locates his black, male body, and by association, the black, male body, in a naturalized space that is reconcilable to the American public's imaginary. But it is in the combination of the act of his hero-ness and the fact of his blackness that has found the postmodern, American dream brilliance that has been created out of a young basketball player from Akron, Ohio. In 2006, at age 21, LeBron made his debut in the NBA playoffs, leading the Cavaliers there for the first time in 8 years. For NBA fans and people in the know about professional sports, James's entry into the champions' proving ground is merely a matter of slam-a-fest destiny. His exceptionalism, both real and constructed, ordained his American journey towards success and legend in the eyes of an American public devout to the promise of the monument that is the American dream. For David Stern, the league, the Cavaliers franchise, Nike and Coca-Cola, James's arrival to the playoffs is but the logical next step they had hoped for in a blueprint that combines James's skill with the ideology of meritocracy, the allure of success, the safety of a manageable black body, and the insatiability of the global market for fetishized objects of cool aspiration toward the goal of, not just making money, but of the much more lucrative project of creating popular consciousness. Behold, the model minority for a new millennium. James is raw on the court and respectable on the street, creating a racial positioning that, white, American audiences are only too eager to consume. LeBron may be worth $120 million, but the ideological whole that he represents is worth much more than the sum of its parts. Much more. One need only see the Nike campaign that was launched during the 2006 playoffs to realize just how much more. Alternating between a montage of the industrialized urban blight and heart of Cleveland, Ohio, and its citizens, all LeBron devotees, and a montage of LeBron playing against various opponents and making extraordinary shots, the driving message of the commercial spot is "We are all witnesses," an idea that flashes periodically throughout the scenes on storefront signs, on marquees, on fan signs, on t-shirts, and, finally, on a silent black and white Nike billboard, just in case you miss the floating, ethereal intimation of the other signs. It is not backed by a lively hip-hop score or a catchy pop theme, instead the music is a commanding drumline beat, it is majestic and demands both attention and respect, it isn't just hype, it is holy. Being witness calls to mind seeing the truth as it unfolds through our own eyes, bearing witness calls to mind a spiritual responsibility to bring forth the truth and share it with others so that they too may be witness, creating an ever-growing group of witnesses to testify to the experience of such an unparalleled phenomenon. By turns genius and audacious, Nike makes it clear that we are being turned into, if we haven't already become, apostles, spreading the gospel of LeBron, and by association, his Nikes. It seems like an overly sacred campaign for a commodity as profane as athletic shoes. It also seems a bit apocryphal when you consider that the focus was on a player only 3 years into his professional career. Whatever it seemed, it is indicative of the messianic fervor of exceptionalism that has been injected into the property, sign, body, and career of LeBron James. He is the American dream. He is the Holy Grail. And if he isn't, we may all be lost. Dreaming the impossible dream. So, in the end, to whom does the American dream belong, both materially and rhetorically? Does it belong to those who believe? To those who believe it is real and so continue to strive, even in the face of mounting evidence that it is a farce? Is it the believers, including children and immigrants, who make the dream endure? Or does it belong to those who themselves don't believe in the dream but believe in the dreamers of the dream, and see in them the path to money and power? It is the non-believers, including politicians and CEOs, who invest the dream with power. On many levels the question is an ideological, if not philosophical, one, but in the world of 21st century American popular culture, the American dream, in all of its paradoxical glory, is currently in the hands of the NBA and the myriad people who hold a stake in the league, including players, owners, corporations, and fans. The NBA and its constituents are marketing, and manipulating, the dream better than almost anybody in the pop culture game today, with the notable exception of American Idol. But unlike American Idol that offers up American dream mythology in an inoffensive, saccharine way, where the public has its say, the best person wins, and we're all carried away by a never-give-up power pop ballad sung by our teary-eyed idol, the cult of the NBA since the 1990s seems to conspicuously play in the murky ironies of American dream myth and has not only sold basketball, shoes, sports drinks, and the like but has also laid bare, whether conscious or not, the complicated ways in which race stands at the center of how our nation imagines, creates, and fabricates ideologies of opportunity, meritocracy, democracy, and freedom. As a way of illustrating what I mean, and as a way of moving toward a conclusion, I want to end by considering the connections between several of the corporate campaigns of 4 NBA superstars and the media lynchings of 3 of the most recognizable criminalized black bodies in the last 20 years. Discipline and Punish, Media TED, Black Masculinity. The 4 NBA stars on whose campaigns I am focusing are Michael Jordan, Latrell Sprewell, Allen Iverson, and LeBron James. Under consideration are the aforementioned Jordan and James campaigns, Be Like Mike for Gatorade, and Witness for Nike, respectively, as well as the Latrell Sprewell campaign, I Am the American Dream for and Shoes, and Allen Iverson's print ads for Reebok's I Am What I Am campaign. Having already discussed the first 2 campaigns in a degree of detail, I want to briefly introduce the Sprewell and Iverson campaigns. The first, Latrell Sprewell for and Shoes, is a television spot that aired only briefly in 1998. Comprised of black and white images of Sprewell that purposefully create a sense of the threat of difference, and of blackness, including images of Sprewell undergoing the intricate and time-consuming process of having cornrows put into his hair and set to Jimi Hendrix's famously disquieting version of the Star-Spangled Banner, with Latrell doing a voiceover that states, "Some people see me as an American nightmare, but I am the American dream." The commercial unabashedly threw down an ideological gauntlet, especially as it came on the heels of Sprewell's highly publicized choking incident with his then Golden State coach, P.J. Carl Simo. It disrupted the quaintness of American dream mythology by presenting a raw look at what it actually takes to dream the dream. If you are black in America, you must be strong, unapologetic, and prepared for the challenge, even if you are an NBA superstar, especially if you are an NBA superstar. The commercial spot stood as if to say, America, you thought you had imagined me out of existence, except to the degree that I starred in your hidden, and not so hidden, fears, but now I'm here to realize your greatest fear, making my claim to the American dream, and leaving my mark on it so that others like me may follow. Now imagine that. In one spectacularly composed 2-minute spot for, purportedly, basketball shoes, Sprewell disassembled the sacred visage of the American dream and remade it in his image. More recently, in 2002, Allen Iverson, after signing a lifetime contract with Reebok just 1 year earlier, appeared in Reebok's series of I Am What I Am advertisements. In his print ad, Iverson is on the left side of a double-page layout. He is dressed in all white, including his cocked cap and do-rag, cutting a kind of penitent posture with his hands pressed together as in prayer. The image makes an ironic evocation of Iverson as an angel. But the focus is quickly drawn to the right-facing page where an illustrated image of a flame-haloed devil stands. It is assumed, as the supposed notion of what is contained beneath Iverson's facade when he claims I am what I am. Again, as in the earlier discussion about Nike's Witness campaign, this ad uses religious imagery and metaphor and plays with the relationship between the sacred and the profane, cashing in on the proven power of linking black NBA superstars to rhetorics of spiritual good and evil, a commodified version of the real-world moral designations projected onto the black body in everyday America. These 2 campaigns, along with Be Like Mike and Witness, as well as the discrete signs of Latrell Sprewell, Allen Iverson, Michael Jordan, and LeBron James, are constitutive of a larger American culture of social and ideological displacement regarding race. Each campaign and respective celebrity signifier are selling distinct ideologies regarding American dream ideals, authenticity, and black male identity. Jordan's and Gatorade's assimilationist fantasy of meritocracy is seemingly far removed from the rebel individualist challenge to the terms of American dream success of both Sprewell and Iverson and Reebok, and both appear starkly distanced from James's and Nike's messianic ode to American exceptionalism. At the same time, all 4 campaigns rely on the same strategies of what Michael Omi and Howard Winnett have identified as racial formation, the socio-historical process by which racial categories are created, inhabited, transformed and destroyed. The process of racial formation is comprised of historically located racial projects, of which these campaigns and their stars are primary examples. Omi and Winnett define a racial project as simultaneously an interpretation, representation, or explanation of racial dynamics, and an effort to reorganize and redistribute resources along particular racial lines. The ideologies and signs of these campaigns as racial projects work to displace larger social terrors for the American public where racial insecurities are central, including crime, terrorism, racism, immigration, and globalization, by reorganizing the fear of the other into a commodity that can be owned, an ethnic otherness that can be mediated, and an American imaginary that can be reified. These campaigns, and the ideological and market signs that have been created out of black NBA superstars to support these campaigns, have been formulated on a palimpsest of black manhood in America, constantly attempting to refigure black masculinity in equal terms but forever having to negotiate the residual stereotypes and fears that have historically limited black manhood in America. As racial projects they work in conjunction with other media-saturated, though outwardly contrary, racial projects to maintain a static conception of the place of black masculinity in the national imagination. 3 examples of racial projects that appear contrary to the ideological work being produced through the NBA, its stars, and its constituents, though are actually complexly interrelated to them in the process of racial formation, are the separate drives in the past 20 years to hyper-criminalize and hyper-racialize the bodies and signs of Willie Horton, O.J. Simpson, and Stan Tookie Williams. Even without Nike's encouragement, we have all been witnesses to the exaggerated constructions of racial paranoia that became represented by the images of these 3 men, all of which seem to legislate the thrust toward racial containment in America. They did not sell us shoes or sports drinks, rather they bartered in democratic ideology, and like Jordan, Sproul, Iverson, and James, they sustained the illusion of American racial logic. One elected a president, Horton, one exploited the fantasy of racial neutrality in the American justice system, Simpson, and one exposed the hypocrisy of America's belief in the deterrent potential of the death penalty, Williams. They were the American nightmare, not just because they represented the threat of blackness, but because everything about them, especially the images created around them, displayed the contradictions of American ideals. But as long as we still wanted to be like Mike, those nightmares and contradictions could be held at bay, at least theoretically, by America's capacity to filter race through the mediated figures of good black pop culture icons. Good because they serve America's imagined notions of fairness, hard work, respectability, and success, or, as in cases of Sproul and Iverson, good because the idea of threat is a commodified, performative one. In fact, it is one that sells, and, perhaps more importantly, it is one that is ostensibly manageable, either by the team, the league, the companies, or the market. The irony of the connection between Willie Horton, O.J. Simpson, and Tookie Williams, and Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Allen Iverson, and Latrell Sproul, along with most of the black NBA superstars of today is that, as easily as the first 3, so many countless criminalized black male bodies in the United States are denied social and moral redemption because of their race, their presumed inherent transgression, and the need of the American public to reify much of its racist illogic. So too are the last 4 elevated to redeem us, to maintain our sense of ourselves as a nation that is righteous, equal, and free, and to allow us to continue dreaming the American dream, not by voting, protesting, or pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps, but by buying sneakers and sports drinks and by believing that we can be like Mike. So in the end, Tookie may have died for our sins, but who knows but that on the lower frequencies, LeBron speaks for you. I am a witness. 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 LeBron speaks for you. I am a witness.